You're listening to the Self-Made is a Myth, Make a Difference Together show with your host, Coach Tim Campsall, where we talk with successful business owners to hear the stories of their journeys in building their successful businesses. And more importantly, we recognize the folks who help them excel because we know that achieving business success is not something we can do on our own.
Hello, everyone. This is Coach Tim Campsall, and I'm excited to have a fellow business owner from Indiana with us today. Something unique about my guest is that he has several lifelong friends who serve in the mission field all over the world, and he's got to go on some pretty cool adventures himself. In his downtime, he loves to sit quietly by the fire with his dad, and he's most proud of his 20-year marriage along with his children. It's 28-year marriage. Yes, along with his children. And it's my pleasure to welcome Bobby to the show today. Hi, Bobby.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much. 28 years. That is incredible. Congratulations. So
yeah, we were pretty young.
Well, hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. Tell us your full name and a little bit of your personal story, like where you were born and where you live, about your family and hobby.
So my name is Bobby Williams. I'm actually the second, which is a little bit deceptive because I'm named after my grandfather. Then my son is named after his grandfather, my father. And then if you were to have gone to one of our family reunions back in the 80s and 90s and you said, "Hey, Bob," about 15 people would have turned around. So we don't have a very creative naming in our family. So BGW Construction, a lot of people, that's my main business. I own 3 businesses, and that's one that I named after my grandfather. Is really, people assume it's me. And if you look at the logo, there's a circular saw in that logo because he did everything with the circular saw.
Very cool.
Yeah. He used to actually give me a hard time when I bought my first chop saw. "You don't need that." I'm like, "Well, it makes it a lot easier, Grandpa." No, I, as you said, married 28 years. I was born in actually Lakenheath, England, on a Milburn, United Kingdom's Air Force base. My dad was in the service during Vietnam, so I was a naturalized citizen, and came to live here in Plainfield with my family. My grandfather owned a business unrelated to construction with his 2 brothers here locally. And so I got to watch a family business and all of the dysfunction that goes with that, right? So I was never going to be an entrepreneur. And met my wife at church. We started dating my senior year in high school and got married right before my senior year in college. And she was 19, I was 21, and everybody told us it was a mistake. So, 28 years later, I feel like we've won. But,
right? That's awesome.
Yeah, I way outkicked my coverage. My wife's a partner at a CPA firm, and she works largely just during tax season, busy season. So I get to sleep with my CPA, which helps and hurts. So we've got 4 kids, 3 of our own, and then we adopted my niece when she was 12, and so we've got 4 kids. Maci's the oldest, my niece. I call her my naughter, and she calls me Dunkle Bobby. So yeah, and then Myka, KayDee, and Robbie. Myka's married, Maci's married. Myka's 22, and her husband has an entrepreneurial spirit. And then KayDee's going to be a senior, and Robbie's a sophomore.
Wonderful.
So
fantastic.
Yeah.
So
I was go ahead.
No, please.
Well, the first I went to college to be a teacher. I actually went to Bible seminary first. Thought I was going to be a minister. Realized that wasn't my calling, and ended up going to IU here in Indianapolis to major in English because I thought I was going to want to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And I went ahead and got my education endorsement and ended up teaching and coaching at the local high school here in Plainfield, Indiana for about 18 years. And taught and coached. I taught senior English and composition and literature all those years and coached football and wrestling and track occasionally.
Yeah.
And then I started BGW Construction as a side hustle, you know, and then just life gets a hold of you and wake up one day and I'm working 7 days a week. And so something had to give. So in 2015, I retired from education formally to go full time with BGW Construction.
That's cool. So you've already had some humor in your story, so I'm sure there's a funny story that your family likes to tell about you. Is there anyone that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this one for a minute. There's a lot of silly things. I would probably land on the time that I drove my sister, who I then adopted her daughter. I drove her boyfriend's motorcycle into my aunt's van, test driving it. Yeah, that was and my wife, I had a motorcycle when we first got married. I had what's called a Hayabusa. So anybody out there that knows bikes, that's the fastest bike back then in the 90s that you could make. It was pretty salty, and I'm not a very big guy. I'm only about 5'7", 5'8". I think I'm 5'7" now. I used to be 5'8". You know, I'm almost. But when we started having kids after 5 years of marriage, she made me get rid of the bike.
Yeah.
And so I loved riding motorcycles. And so my sister was dating this guy, and he brought this brand new Kawasaki Goldwing over, and he's like, "Well, you want to take it for a ride?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And my wife was like, giving me the, and I'm like, no, I got this. And I mean, I could barely climb on this hog. And I don't know what I did. I popped the clutch and ran right into my aunt's van. So he had literally taken it from the shop to show it off. And I probably caused $2,000 worth of damage back when I was that was probably like 2001. I mean, that was a long time ago. So very humbling.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing. So you told us a little bit about how the business came about, but at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
Yeah. So when Karen rolled over one morning in like 2011 and said, "This just isn't working," you know, I mean, she wasn't going to leave me, but she was going to be unhappily married for 50 years. And she was right. I mean, I don't suffer from the addictions that many people do, but I think I'm a workaholic. And I enjoy working. I'm here early, and my shop, we've got a beautiful building, you know, and my shop is across the way from my house. I live in my grandfather's house, and I built it on that property. It's commercial land, so I could be over here all the time. So whenever I was teaching and coaching and running the business, I was working 7 days a week. And so, you know, it took me a while to wrap my mind around what am I going to do. And I've actually thought about shutting the business down so that I could continue to I loved coaching varsity football. And was very good friends, and still am, with all those coaches. In fact, 2 of the coaches on staff now work for me. And yeah, so I gave up football. The Lord talked to me that spring because I was going to give up the business. And we went to a concert in Columbus, Indiana, and had great seats. It was a musical group called Casting Crowns. I don't know. Okay, yeah. So they've got a song called American Dream. And it just tells my story, you know, where I'm more worried about work than being with my kids. And we had gone from 2 kids to 4 kids almost overnight, because we had my boy Robbie, and then we adopted Maci. And so we were, you know, she needed help. So the Lord talked to me, and I went and gave up football, and then felt the urge. You know, teaching wasn't as much fun when I wasn't coaching. And then it was very quickly, she was like, you know, it doesn't make sense for you to quit this business, because it generates a lot better income for the family for the time.
Yeah.
So once I bathed it in prayer, I would say the confidence, I don't remember ever not being confident. I knew something was going to work.
Yeah.
And it was grossing, you know, $600,000 as a side hustle.
Wow.
So I knew that I could replace, even though I was, fully vested as a teacher with a master's degree, I could easily replace my, I never would have guessed it would have turned out to what it is today and what it's continuing to be.
Yeah.
But that's the blessings of following, following the Lord.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell us more about the company. What's the name? What do you guys do? How do you help people?
So BGW Construction, and we are in all things related to residential home remodel, and we're a design build firm.
Okay.
So I realized when I left education that we were doing largely like glorious outdoor spaces. And so I knew that we would starve in the winters if I didn't change it up a little bit. And I'd done like some bars and brew pubs. Indiana for a while was the #1 state in the union for microbreweries.
Okay.
So I like carpentry. And so I loved designing and doing these really cool bars with, live edge tops, epoxied. And so it was real easy to start doing kitchens and bathrooms.
Sure.
And when we brought our reputation, because as my building, I didn't grow my business the way most people do. It was a side hustle. So it was all extra money. So I didn't really care about margins or it was all just extra money. So if I get busy, I'd just raise my prices. And so that was kind of always the philosophy. So I kind of kept that. I got a reputation for taking on really challenging outdoor spaces. And we kept that with kitchens and bathrooms. A few years ago, back in 2016, 2017, we got an opportunity to do some vintage homes built in the 1800s here in Indianapolis. Yeah. We worked alongside several other companies like that. And one of them, you might have heard of Good Bones on HGTV, Nina and her mom. And so HGTV actually followed us because we were also taking down barns and turning it into furniture. And that was when that Barnwood Builders. And so they followed us for about a year, filmed us, came up with this really cool like trailer. I mean, it was so bizarre, 2 years out of education and we're being recorded. And
awesome.
They ended up not hiring, they bought rights to I think it was called like Hoosier Rescue or something. And they ended up buying rights to the show, but they greenlit Nina and her mom. And I always told Jason, my general manager, that if he was as good looking as Nina, then maybe we'd have a show.
That's awesome.
So that was kind of the evolution. And we took that custom home builder model. I've got some friends that they build new custom homes, and we brought that to the residential remodeling space, and it's been very successful.
Fantastic. So Bobby, share a story where someone pushed you or inspired you that you could do it, even though maybe you didn't think that you could, and the impact that person had on you.
Yeah, my favorite story on that one is these buildings that I'm sitting here, which really helped launch the other two companies. One is what's called Williams Trace Park. I built on this land that I'm on that my grandfather, I was able to acquire from my grandmother after he died. It's about 9 acres, but it's right in the middle of town, and it's just a great location. You're 30 minutes from anywhere in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And so I was able to build two essentially 7,000 square foot buildings. And one was going to be the office for the shop in my construction company. And the other building was going to be like it would rent out. Well, I was really struggling because I was working out of my garage. We were almost debt free. I was comfortable, and I was really struggling with the idea of building these buildings. And I've got a buddy, one of the ones that was a missionary that you talked about in the introduction, who spent about 5 years in Northern Ireland, and he was getting ready to go to Northern Ireland. And I was watching him, sort of follow that, that trajectory of his life, knowing nobody in Ireland. And here he's up, upsetting his family, his wife and 2 kids, and they're going to Ireland to be missionary, to serve the Lord. And it was a few months before he left, and he asked me what was new at the business. And I said, well, let me walk you out here. And I showed him this dirt. It was just a big field that I grew up mowing. I used to mow it with a push mower, about 3 acres. I got paid $5 a week. I forgot about that. And but I told him what my vision was, and he was just so supportive and encouraging. And he said, well, have you brought it to the Lord? And I said, well, no, not really. And So we prayed about it. He prayed a great prayer. And then I really spent a lot of time, alone thinking about it, making sure it was right. And once I decided that, hey, I think this is, I'm not one of those people that thinks necessarily the Lord speaks to you and tells you to do things, but I think you bring him into your decisions.
Yeah.
Everybody, I'm sure, has some sort of a faith, or the people that I know and most successful people, they have some sort of something bigger than them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Aaron was huge for me to build these buildings, which then launched also Legacy Motorsports. And, like I said, it's just been an amazing run these last few years.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. So the sports business, have you been on a motorcycle since your fun little story?
Okay, so here's another funny story. So it's Legacy Motorsports, and we work on vintage, pre-1970s cars, 70s and older. And so we largely do customer work because there's not a whole lot of, we're Indianapolis, right? The Indianapolis 500 is a big car culture here.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot of shops that work on carbureted vehicles anymore. It's kind of a dying art. And so like I said, we work on customer cars, whether we build them from the ground up as a resto mod or complete restoration, or we've built a couple Cobras, 65 Cobra replicas. That I own one now because it gives me that motorcycle fix. But the funny story is I had gone to Hope, Indiana a few years ago to look at a couple cars that a guy was selling, because I'm always looking for cars to flip for good prices. And they just weren't really my kind of cars. He was asking a fair price, but there wasn't any room for me to make any money. But as I was in there, I was kind of rubbernecking, and I saw this old motorcycle, and he goes, "Oh, do you like bikes?" And I said, "Well, I pee standing up." So we walked over, and it was a 67 Triumph Bonneville.
Ooh.
And which is a really cool kind of like a cafe bike, and it had dust all over it. And there was a picture above it that this old guy, he was jumping a hill. He raced it in Tokyo, Japan.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, "I'd let this go." And I'm like, "Man," I told my wife I wouldn't buy a bike until the kids were out of it. And he goes, "Well, I was thinking, 3 would get it to you. And that's pretty good." I'm like, "I don't really want to spend $3,000. He goes, "No, I was thinking 300. Here's 300.
Yeah.
Loaded it up in my truck. And now the engine's locked up, and I haven't done anything to it because it looks great as a wall hanger. I've just got it sitting out.
Yeah.
So I do have one bike.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
Drive it. Yeah.
Bobby, what's been your biggest learning as a business owner?
Okay. I'm changing. I would say changing as a teacher and a coach, you don't give up on anybody, and as a believer, you don't give up on anybody. But as a business owner, there are some people you're not giving up on them, but it doesn't mean that they stay working for you.
Yeah, right.
And I would keep it, everybody I'm sure has heard, be slow to hire, quick to fire.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I really appreciated that statement until I started having a lot of employees.
Mm.
And one bad employee, it's not about them, whether they've got personal problems or they're a narcissist, or maybe I've had a couple guys that had some substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
And when you keep people like that, even if you protect your clients, like the guys that have had those problems, we just would keep them in the shop and work here. So, we wouldn't risk them any issues. What you're telling the rest of your company by keeping those people. And I always wanted to coach, right? I always wanted to, hey, we can do this, rah, rah, but sometimes the best thing for them, and certainly for the business, is to let them go. So I would say that's been the hardest change, but the most, I've seen the most growth in that, because I've watched people, when you hold them accountable, they rise up to the occasion.
Yes, absolutely.
And if they recognize that there's an option that they won't be around, then they either leave and figure it out, or they figure it out. We're going to be successful with you, or we're going to be successful without you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were just mentioning, like when we keep a poor performer, then we're telling everybody else that it's okay to be a poor performer, right? And yeah, not only are we damaging the individual relationship, but we're lowering the bar for everybody else in terms of what's acceptable. So yeah, great learning. Thank you for sharing that. We know business success doesn't happen in isolation. So Bobby, what's one of your biggest challenges you've had over the years, and maybe somebody that came alongside you and helped you through it?
So when I built these buildings, and keep in mind, I was a teacher. My wife is a humble CPA partner. It's not like she makes a crazy amount of money, and she wanted to be a mom. And so being an accountant allowed her to spend a lot of time at home, other than those few months. So we were never wealthy. I mean, we were, I would say, lower middle class or mid-middle class towards the end, whenever I, was making what I was making as a teacher and a coach. And so the prospect of spending so much money to build these buildings was really a huge test on my faith, and I wouldn't say my faith necessarily, because I never would have questioned there was a Lord, but I questioned his decisions.
Sure. Yes.
And so it just made me look at things totally different. And so when I built these buildings, we were grossly over budget. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I would have never imagined that we would have had to spend what we ended up spending. And when I look back at the amount of money that I paid for like the concrete, which was still like $100,000 or $115,000 for all the concrete for this facility, it should have been $200,000. I mean, I was able to get really good quality work at a reduced rate, but it was still, we were massively over budget. So at the end, when you're finishing up, and if nobody has ever gone through a capital project like that for a company, the bank basically looks at your designs and they adopt an appraisal value of it. And then they loan you a percentage of that appraisal value.
Right.
I owned the land, so I was able to use the land and leverage it as my down payment.
Yeah.
But when you're 100% over budget, the bank starts getting a little bit ticked.
Yeah.
And so we got to the end, and I needed like another $100,000 to finish. And I mean, I was tapped out. I'd had one of those loan shark loans where it's like high interest and just to meet payroll. My general manager, Jason, he had taken out a home equity line of credit for like 20 grand on his house to help out. And so I ended up going to my dad, my dad's my best friend. I love sitting around the fire. I feel so blessed that my dad's still around, and we get to, he gets to be a good mentor to me. But when I left home, I mean, I'm an ex-genner. I left home. I didn't want anything, I didn't ask for anything. I was going to be a man. And so it was pretty humbling to have to go back to him and ask him, and that he had that kind of cash, not in cash, but this credit card. And for him to come alongside me, and we went to lunch, and I kind of told him the problem, and we kind of added up what we needed. And I mean, he had almost like to the dollar available.
Wow.
And that was able to get me past the hump.
Yeah.
And so that was just an amazing story that he came along. And then it was like, and I mean, I'm like having conversations like, okay, God, I mean, if this is an exercise in humility, and this is, I'm supposed to lose everything, please allow me to be able to pay these people back that believed in me. But I think I can live with that. And once I got past that it's not mine anyway, it's like the stress went away. And a month later, the bank, the building's appraised for, probably maybe like 10,000 over what I needed them to appraise for, which is not much.
That's awesome.
Which is not much when you look at the big number.
Sure.
And I was able to pay everybody off. And it was just, that was people believing in me and believing in my vision, and being able to pour not just their love and support with words, but also financially, and the fact that I could quickly pay them back. That was something I don't know that I can ever put into words how much I appreciate that.
That's amazing. Wow. Praise God for providing all those different options for you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Bobby, and ask you to pick 3 people in your business owner journey that you're most grateful for them being there to help with your growth. Who are those 3 people and how they help you?
Well, the easiest one would be my grandfather, who, like I said, he died in 2003. Well before I'd really even imagined having this. I was building like decks in the summertime. But he was so influential on so many different things, how he dealt with people. He had a business. And I'll tell this story because it just talks about the kind of man that he was and the kind of man that I want to be as a business owner. So my grandfather owned a company called Williams Brothers TV and Appliances. And they were like the Walmart before there was a Walmart.
Okay.
And when they sold an appliance, they gave a lifetime warranty on that appliance. Yeah. This is 70s and 80s. I mean, nobody would even think about that. So this is like 2001. And Grandpa and I were together, and we were working on a house that I bought for my wife and I. We were downsizing because we were having our first kid. And I bought like an 1860s house here in Plainfield. And so that was my first. I never knew that I would be known for these vintage homes 20 years later. But so he was kind of helping me with that because he was retired, and he got a call on what he called his car phone. We would call that a flip phone now, but he got a call on his car phone. Now, keep in mind, his business ceased to exist around 95.
Okay.
And he was retired. He was like 72. And he gets a call on his car phone, and he picks up, well, hello. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I remember you. How are you? Oh, okay. But, then he hangs up. And he goes, hey, do you mind going for a ride with me? It was about 30 minutes west of town, out in the farm area. And we went to this little old lady's house, and she comes out, this large, 80-year-old woman in a muumuu. And she remembered my grandpa. He gives her a hug, and we walk out. I still don't know what this is about. And there was an old dishwasher, and that it had a problem. And so he kind of went in there and figured it out. We walked out to his Blazer, and he had a big toolbox with his stuff, and he happened to have whatever part he needed for this obscure dishwasher that was probably 30 years old.
Yeah.
And he fixed it. And we get done, and she goes, okay, well, Bob, how much do I owe you? And he goes, well, now we gave you a lifetime warranty. And I have that part, and I mean, I'll probably never use it again. But you would have thought, I mean, this was a lady that probably didn't have a great deal of money. And it was just so impactful to me. And so we left, we get in the truck, and I'm just kind of blown away at what I just witnessed. And I said to Grandpa, I go, hang on a second. How did she get your cell phone number? And he goes, well, when Williams Brothers went away back in 95, I took their landline number. And do you know that they can magically forward those calls to this car phone? He did that so that he could, while he was alive.
Wow. His
brothers were both gone. Everybody that had worked for him were on the other, so that he could service the lifetime warranty that they guaranteed. I mean, how can that not be my number one?
Wow. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So he was great. My dad too. I've talked about him, and he, my dad became a nurse late in life, so he taught me the courage. He was a mechanic at my grandfather's business. Mm-hmm. And he went back to school. My little sister was born. She was in an accident. So she's about 10 years younger than me. And she was born with a bunch of heart problems. Mm. And he didn't like that. He didn't understand that my mom's a nurse, that the doctors, he couldn't understand what they were saying. Yeah. So he went back to school. He quit working for the family business and went back to school. And my dad, he would not be ashamed of me saying, because it's an amazing story, is borderline illiterate. I mean, he really struggles to read, because back when he was in school, he needed glasses, but they didn't diagnose him until he was in like 4th grade. Yeah. So he can read, but he struggles. So he graduated with a nursing degree by, they didn't have audiobooks back then. He would pay people to read the books to him, and he'd video. So watching him struggle through college when I was in high school, and he was about 40 when he did that. He graduated when he was 42, so he'd have been 38 to 40. And I was 40 years old when I left education to do this. Wow. So the fear, I'd watched my father do that. So it's not really business, but again, you have to, I think it was Elon Musk's wife said that, when you're an entrepreneur, and I never understood this until the last few years, you have to be able to deal with a level of stress that would break most people.
Yeah.
And then eventually it just becomes, well, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
And so that was really impactful. And then a third person, I'm involved in a group called Truth at Work, which is a faith-based CEO networking kind of a group.
Yeah.
And there's a guy in there that has just become there's a lot of guys in there that I love, but one of them just lives down the road from me. And he is high level business acumen. He got his MBA, when he was young, and he sells and manages airplanes. So he does very well, as you can imagine. His name is Casey Blake, and Casey's just been so generous with his time, so generous with helping me understand. I'm an English teacher with a master's degree in education.
Yeah,
I've read a lot, and I've read about everything that you can read as far as business entrepreneurship and CEO and leadership. But there are so many things that he came alongside me 4 or 5 years ago to help me begin to understand, wrap my mind around how to grow a business.
Yeah.
And so he's been huge.
Fantastic. So thinking about the future, Bobby, over the next 1 to 3 years, what's the number one priority for the business, or a challenge that you need to work through in order to achieve your goals?
I think the hardest thing, we've got great systems and processes, and I've developed a really good team. And the hardest position, when you're the only owner, you wear every hat. Okay, now I'm the accountant, now I'm the salesperson, now I'm the project manager. And so giving those hats away and hiring the right people and hiring good people, paying them well, knowing that you're probably not, they're not going to necessarily be a great return for a period of time. That I've largely done that hard work over the last 4 or 5 years. The most difficult, challenging thing that we have right now is sort of the lead flow generation, getting people that want to spend the kind of money that it takes to do what we want to do, that understand the importance of a design and organization and project management, and they're willing to pay for that, and getting in front of them. That is probably the biggest challenge, and I'm close, and I've tried to take that in house, because it's all of my social media, so to speak, or online present website is also personal, and I've tried to farm it out, and I've never had good luck with that. And so, and I don't like salesy stuff. We're not going to sit in front of you and until you sign us a down payment check. We're very passive, and this is what you want. Here's what it's going to look like in a 3D environment. We're going to do a great job. We just did one exactly like this last year. Here's their phone number if you want to talk to them about their experience, but it's going to cost us. And if you want this to be the least amount of headache possible, we feel very strongly that you need to hire us. And that budget is always on people's minds. And so that's the hardest thing that I'm still working through. Oh, that'll be the biggest component of how far we get in the next 3 to 5 years.
Got it. Yeah. Awesome. Last question. Jim Rohn, great business guru, one of his famous quotes, "We become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with." So as you think about that quote, what advice do you have for people who are trying to do it on their own, for business owners who aren't embracing that idea and are going at it by themselves?
I love that quote. I used to say that as a coach all the time, and I would push back. I don't think that was Jim Rome that coined that, but he did make it famous. But that might be because I don't like Jim Rome, football guy. I'm an avid sports guy. Man, if anybody's watching this and you don't have a group of 3 to 5 people that are also business owners, you're doing it wrong. And you're going to create a scenario of loneliness. And because it you can't open your books and have a real conversation with your employees.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that wrong for a few years because I'm an open book guy. But what ended up happening was I was laying burdens that they should not bear
Yes.
on them.
Yes.
And it wasn't fair to them. And once I realized that, I think my dad helped me realize that, then I began to keep it a little bit more close to my vest. And so, but then who do you talk to? Because at the end of the day, this organ between our ears, right? It's really complicated, and there's all sorts of baggage.
Yeah.
And I believe I've told you, Tim, that in the last 10, 11 years, I've lost, in the last 12 years, I've lost 10 friends to suicide. 2 of them in the last year. And of those 10, 8 of them were also entrepreneurs. Now, that wasn't the only trigger, right?
Sure.
I'm not, it's not the dentist. Remember, they used to say the dentist, suicide rates is high. I'm not saying that at all, but it was one of the triggers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's, until you've been here, and I think there's an unhealthy social media influence where, you pop on YouTube and there's all these guys that are influencers. They're like, oh, all you got to do is wash windows and you'll be a millionaire.
Yeah.
And there's all these different things out there that sort of telling these young kids in their early 20s or whatever that it's easy. And I don't want to make it out to be that it's harder than what it is. But it is harder than what they make it sound.
Yes.
And you do have to get comfortable with not control, the illusion of control.
Yeah.
I just chuckle, and I'm sure you guys do too, those of you watching, whenever somebody, if you've been an owner for a while, when somebody says, I want to be a business owner, so I have more free time.
Right.
And it just doesn't, or I don't want to have a boss. Yeah, you're trading one direct report for 45, and so we all are accountable to someone. And if you don't have a group of people that understand what you're going through on a deep level, that understand what it's like, that payroll is on Wednesday afternoon, which means I got to have $30,000 in the bank by Wednesday morning, and it's Monday, and you wake up and there's $5,000 in the bank.
Right.
And how, and just adapting, adjusting, and overcoming, and being okay with that stress, and learning to communicate with people. So I don't know if I've completely answered your question.
No, it's a great
but
answer.
I mean, Truth at Work has been huge for me on that. And even you can't talk to your wife about it because you don't want to give her the burden.
Yep.
Your friends that aren't business owners, they love you.
They don't get it, though.
They don't get it.
Yep.
And so you have to be around and every business is the same. I talked about Casey. There's nothing similar about our businesses. He just bought and sold a plane from Brussels, and he works with guys that have this ridiculous amount of money. And there's nothing about, but you're still dealing with people. You're still dealing with payroll. You're still dealing with all that.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a group of people, and they need to be wise people. They need to be people that are going to make sure that they hold you accountable to do it right, and to not let you take the easy way out and cheat on your taxes and cheat on your customers, because otherwise you'll make a quick dollar, but you won't be around. The companies, we've been around, my company's been around for 25 years now. And I think that we've got that's knocking on some wood. We've got a pretty good online reputation, 5-star on everything. And so but it's because we try to do it right. We have good hearts.
Yeah.
We want to please people, and we're honest. So,
man, I love it. Thank you so much, Bobby, for being on the show. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for inviting me. And, I don't know I don't know if my words have done anything, but hopefully somebody out there, hits a nerve.
Yeah. Last little thing before we close out. Sounds like you've had some pretty incredible people in your life that have helped you along your business journey. So if they were all here today on the show, what would you want to say to them?
Man, I'd just say, I just hug them, and I'm a kisser. One of my, one of my buddies, the first one to commit suicide, Doug, he was a man's man. I mean, redhead, big, bulky. He and I were wrestlers. He went to a different school, but he was my best friend growing up in high school, and we kind of drifted apart, and he fell into a world of addiction. But Doug used to always kiss me on the cheek, and I always thought that was really bizarre, especially in the 90s.
Yeah.
And but I think there was a little Italian that he wanted to be. And ever since Doug passed away, I have a picture of 7 of us, and that came up together, and 3 of the people in that picture are now gone. There's only 4 of us left. And that didn't include Doug, because Doug was not in that picture. It was at his funeral. And we all kiss each other, on the cheeks, and so I'd probably, there's no words that can, there's so many people that just even a small word of encouragement. And there's a lot of people I'd be looking at a lot of people that told me I couldn't, that told me I shouldn't.
Yeah.
If I listened to the people that told me I was crazy for leaving education, I wouldn't have left. And I would want them here, and not to rub it in their face, but to say, listen, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Believe in what, we all have a set of gifts that we were uniquely born to do, and we were uniquely born for. And if you're not using those gifts to the best of your ability, then that's a sin in a small way. It's not a big sin like murder, but it's a sin. You're not doing everything that you can, to be kingdom purpose with what you've given. And so I would probably, that's what I would say if I were to say anything, but I'd probably get choked up and hug and kiss people.
I love it. Bobby, thanks again for being on the show.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thanks for listening to the Self-Made is a Myth show. Please help spread this movement by liking and subscribing to our show and following us on Facebook and LinkedIn. To join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. Okay, folks, that's a wrap. Please pay it forward and be sure to tune in next time to the Self-Made is a Myth podcast.